Welcome to Leader You by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Successful organizations are dependent on people being competent in their job. To prepare people to do the work, we must prepare them according to the skills, knowledge, and abilities required for the job, correctly and consistently. One of the services Black River offers is evaluating employee and candidate competencies. Our 25 competency assessment focuses on the soft skills, or what we like to call them, essential skills. Our competency assessment is used for more accurate hiring practices as well as for staff development. Every organization could use these competencies to ensure an individual's skills match the soft skills required by the job, to nurture the right talent, to improve productivity, and to develop dynamic leaders. For a sample of the 25 leadership competencies, definitions, and assessment, email us at info@blackriverpm.com. All right. Thank you for joining the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a friend, Megan McCaleb. Megan is a leadership and communication specialist, speaker, and coach. As the creator of Improv team culture and Ovation speakers, she's built stages and safe places for individuals and teams to share true stories, merged with effective tools to help people transform yeah, but challenges into yes, and solutions. She's an award-winning author and an award-winning comedian, and the host of I Hardly Know Her podcast. She resides in Boise, Idaho, with her 4 children, 2 cats, and her bright orange Jeep, Jeff. Thank you for joining me, Megan. I'm super excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I always look forward to conversations around all of this yummy subject matter of stories and skills and the blend.
Absolutely. So the reason I had you on the podcast today is because we connected a couple of years ago through the Idaho Women's Business Center, and that's where I kind of got to know you, and you kind of learned what my skill set is as well. And we've touched base a few times and kind of been watching each other, and I'm just fascinated by the work that you're doing, and I think it really jives well with the work that I do. And I love collaborating with people that are like-minded and also are using research-based approaches to help teams function more effectively, individuals and teams function more effectively.
Yeah.
So,
no doubt.
Yeah. So today is a different topic. And even though our podcast is about leadership competencies, the 25 leadership competencies that we help develop, I think improv is it is a research-based technique that actually helps to improve many of the skills that we help our clients to better themselves, better their teams, better their organizations.
Oh, absolutely. It's sort of like it's so funny because it has like this sort of certain expectation or a misunderstanding, I think, from people who hear the word improv and they're like, oh, I can't do improv. They think it's a thing you do as only like a performance type of a thing. And I used to be guilty of that as well. But yeah, it's like, I think it's such a good blend for all the different leadership skills and just pretty much any type of human dynamic, if I'm being totally honest, because we're all improvisers. And when we get to be empowered by those tools, then we go, oh, because every day is improv. I mean, that's no newsflash. Every single day, no matter how much we try to plan, there's no way it's going to run completely perfect minute by minute. And so having just that awareness and using some of those tools as like a mindset strategy even kind of just helps people to be in more of a ready position and feel like we get to elevate in our strengths and celebrate others for their strengths. It's pretty much the most magical thing I've ever known.
Oh, I love it. You're speaking my language. I'm actually getting goosebumps. So when I get those, that's when I know I'm on the actual conversation and I'm living in my soul and my spirit and my purpose is here. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. First, let's just hear your story about, when you were a little girl, did you think I want to be an improv person and speaker and all of this?
Close. I honestly, when I was a kid, I was really drawn to like late night programming at the end of the day. I loved when like I'm the youngest of six kids in a blended home. And so at the end of the day of a busy, bustling household, my mom and stepdad would sit down and they'd watch late night TV. So it was like Johnny Carson, David Letterman, and like on Saturday, of course, Saturday Night Live would come on. And I loved the shift of the energy of the laughter that came. And so obviously I didn't really know the jokes as a kid. What I did notice though was how much I loved the laughter and the connection. And at a pretty young age, I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. My mom would let me stay up on Saturday nights. She'd be putting my hair in the pink sponge rollers for church the next day, and we'd watch Saturday Night Live. And I was just fascinated by it. So I didn't really have like a certain, I mean, I of course fantasized about like, oh my gosh, that'd be so cool to be on the show. And beyond that, it was kind of like, I just really loved the idea of bringing joy and laughter. I was definitely, center of attention type of a kid, and always like looking for ways to make people feel good and laugh and connected. And so, yeah, my story kind of started, I think, back then. And, like a lot of times, unfortunately, like before we started recording, there was a brief mention that like we sometimes think we know what we're going to be when we grow up, or we have these dreams. And then a lot of times life takes us on a totally different journey. And that's definitely the case for me. Like I knew I loved the idea of performing and making people laugh, but I grew up in Boise, Idaho. I've lived here my entire life and never lived anywhere else. And I didn't feel like the opportunities would be there for me in that capacity. And so it took a really different journey. And so like kind of my abbreviated version of the story of how I got from those ideas to what I do today is I I had some early on life circumstances that made me feel like, oh shoot, maybe I'm a lost cause or whatever, or maybe I really screwed up life. And so I got what I call a quote unquote responsible job when I was 18, and I was fresh out of high school. I started working for a bank, and I was like, oh, bank tellers look like that looks fun. I saw some tellers laughing, and it's like, that looks like an enjoyable thing. How hard could that be? And so I applied to work at a bank, and I also applied to work at Southwest Airlines. And I was kind of like, God, or, at the time I was like a very much very active Mormon. And so I was like, Heavenly Father, whatever path you want me to take, I'm following, the signs here. And if I get the airline job, then I'll chase my dreams and see what the world has to offer, and maybe go see like if I can do some things in Hollywood or New York. And if I get this other job, then that's my sign that I should just like put down roots and whatever, very drastic different options. And I ended up in corporate, and I worked in corporate for then 15 years between a couple different jobs. And luckily had improv introduced to me in my early 20s by my older brother. So the fact that I teach improv in the workplace really came in this magical way, because I was working in corporate. I rose the ranks really quickly, not because I'm very good at numbers. In fact, I don't really like math. I learned a lot about the people component of the job. Customers loved me. I knew how to give them attention, and really listen to what their needs were. So I didn't really ever feel like I was being salesy. And a lot of those things I think were kind of just a natural strength. And then when I learned about improv as a performance artist, I just thought, oh, great. I have this fun outlet for the weekends that I can play and be silly, and then be wearing my suits and whatever during the week. And that's really when it hit me within a couple of weeks. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, these tools for performance are really, really powerful for how I was showing up in the workplace. And over many years and trial and error, it kind of evolved to where I launched my business of teaching those improv rules in the workplace for better communication, and leaning into those soft skills. Like a lot of those things that people shied away from for a long time really made a lot of sense to me a long time ago. And so here I am now, a decade later, still teaching improv in the workplace, and the same skills apply in public speaking and connecting with our audience. And I'm having a blast.
Awesome. You're living in your purpose now, aren't you?
Yeah. And it makes a difference. I didn't always understand what that meant, honestly. I read all the books. I'm such an audiobook nerd.
Yeah.
I'm constantly I read books too, but it takes me a little longer. And I love listening to podcasts and just hearing different stories. And a lot of those things, like I hear them and I'm like, I couldn't quite make sense of how it worked for me for a long time, which is kind of sad to say. I was a little bit of a slow learner on how to also have like a really thriving business space in something that's kind of seen as just like, it's just comedy. It's just like, you're just goofing around or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's way more than that.
It is. And that's what I want to educate people on today. People that are interested, because our followers are people that are interested in improving their leadership skills. And this is a free way for them to get to learn those things and to hear stories from leaders that we know and trust like yourself. So you've mentioned a couple of things that I think are key. First off is mindset. And I think that, getting in there, checking our mindset and understanding that we all get in fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And we all do it in different areas. And it's easy to see other people's mindsets, their fixed mindsets, but it's not as easy to see your own, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so what I love is you're helping people with their mindset. And you also mentioned skill set. No, you mentioned tool set. And so, or tools. So these are the three buckets that I think we help, and we both play in these spaces. We help people with their mindset, we help people with their tool set, and we help people with their skill set. Those are the three buckets that I think really we all need help with to thrive, to create human flourishing, to create connection, and fuel our basic human needs. That the competence, autonomy, and relatedness. All of those pieces, we need these things. And in doing some research and thinking about having you on the podcast, it's been a while. I mean, that I've been thinking about this, but I've been doing a little bit of research on the background of improv and what the research says. And what I'm learning is that it actually helps people become more anxious, more confident, increase vulnerability, improve active listening, more presence, and more, what was some of the more positive in their moods, can handle changes in life more effectively. It helps with ego, less rugged individualism, more flexibility, acting with conviction. There's just notes and notes of what the research is showing. And one of the things that it does with the anxiety piece is it increases our uncertainty tolerance.
Yeah.
And think about our illusion of control that we as a society have. Like, we're in control of all things, right? And how much anxiety people get when they don't know the outcome. What's going to happen? Uncertainty, right? So as I've been listening and I listened to a few podcasts on it and read a few books on it and just found, these are all things that are going to help people that are working on their self-leadership, their social and interpersonal skills. And so I want to dive into your yes and theory and see how it applies to all the things I just said, like flexibility, being present, listening, and how you utilize that.
Yeah. Well, so if anyone out there is hearing yes and for the first time, buckle up, because it's two little words and it packs such a punch. Because yes, a lot of times, first let me say that a lot of people have a really bad relationship with the word yes, because we're misusing it. We're using yes as an agreement, or that, like we have to agree with our neighbor who has a different political view than us. Or if we have, like we say yes because it's like an obligation. And so sometimes people are like, well, if I say yes to everything, I have a calendar full of a bunch of stuff I don't want to have to do. And so it has a lot of really negative vibes around it because we've been misusing it. So I want you to first consider the idea that we're going to use yes in a way that maybe means we don't agree. We don't have to agree. And that's where it is so powerful. Yes, in the improv space is an acknowledgement and an acceptance tool, period. It allows us to say, yes, that thing just happened. That person just said that. That bill just came in the mail. That task for work. Like, it doesn't matter what the thing is. It's just our awareness in our head of whatever just occurred, and just simply accepting and acknowledging that it happened, or that it exists, whether or not we like it. The and is what we do with it. It gives us the action to whatever is happening. Is it something we have to do something with? This is a great tool to go, oh, maybe this can be a delegation moment of like, hey, that's a really cool idea. You know who would be amazing at this for this is so-and-so because of their skill set. Like, right? That's what you spend a lot of your time in doing, is really helping to amplify individual strengths so that hopefully we're filling people's plates with things that they're going to be in alignment with and excited about. And so using it as a delegation tool can be powerful. And sometimes, yeah, it's just that determination of like, if I do need to do something with it, like, do I need additional resources or support? Do I need to enlist some people who might have information I can brainstorm with? Or is it just like an acknowledgement of that thing and then I get to move on and I don't have to take any type of ownership? So for me, I really find it's a quick way to compartmentalize what I need to deal with and not feel like overwhelmed at all these things coming at me. We're all very busy. Like, and I think that we need to stop glorifying the busyness. I thought that after COVID, maybe we would have a different perspective on that. I do. I mean, like, I leaned way in when my calendar was suddenly empty. I was like, okay, wait, because it's kind of scary, you know, when you speak and work with teams and have to be around people, and suddenly all of the events are gone in less than 2 weeks. But I remember there being this like shift of going, okay, wait, like, let's just take a breath. Like, this was a really powerful kind of forced pause. And I remember really thinking, I want to be mindful of exactly how I re-engage as things start shifting back. So that's a little bit of a tangent. But the point of yes and is really just, as much as we can simplify things and be in like ready position for whatever is next. And just, it's like, for me, a very rapid fire type of a thing. Yes, that thing is happening. Cool. And if it's something that brings up a lot of feelings, you know, what do I need to do with it? It's like this incredible invitation for us to step up and be very aware, engage at our highest level, be supportive, even if we don't want to be involved with something. Like my yes anders, I do all sorts of huge events and all sorts of crazy things. And I have yes anders who I just tell because I love the moral support. They'll be like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. I can't wait to see what you do with it. And that's how they yes and me. It doesn't mean they have to come volunteer at my event or like do anything. So I could definitely tangent about 12 different directions, but the main thing is it's just a place for us to accept and acknowledge, and then see what do we get to do. Our and allows us to build and expand and delegate and take action in a really intentional way.
I love that. And I love how you said it's not a sign up for things that you don't want to do, because oftentimes when I'm coaching some of my clients, it's like, for me, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, as it relates to my time, as it relates to where I'm going to spend my resources, my time and my money, right? So that's how I ask myself, do I really want to do this, or am I doing it to people please, right? That's a question that I ask myself. But you're saying that this is just an acknowledgement tool and an action, and it doesn't mean you are saying yes to everything. And I want to make that clear to everyone.
Yeah, well, the trick is you can say yes to everything. It just doesn't mean you have to do anything with it or agree. So here's an example, and I'm going to give you two little nuggets. One of them is that to really understand yes and, you have to know its arch nemesis, which is yeah but. And yeah but is the blocking. It's when our defenses go up. It's when we start having to justify everything and arguments and all the things, right? Or sometimes it's the attitude of like, you see someone who's really successful and you're feeling this like jealous vibe, and I'm like, well, that must be nice, or that must have been so easy for them, or yeah, of course they got that. Like there's this whole other town where yeah butters live, and they don't even realize it. And so that's why, especially when we don't like or agree with something, if we bring yes and energy to it, it still just keeps us in a positive and a productive mode, even though we're not taking it on our calendar. So just to reemphasize your point, I want people to understand that you can say yes to anything just to simply acknowledge that it's a thing, that it exists. You just get to be in more control of how do you want to interact with that and engage with it. It can really, the second thing is it can really help demonstrate. Like when I first actually verbalized it in a challenging conversation, I was working at the bank. I was a manager at the time. And so one of my daily tasks was that I had to look at the overdraft report, which is not fun. And sometimes customers would beat me to the punch. And I remember one morning, this was maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I started doing improv, and I'd learned a little bit about how to have a heightened emotion in a scene on an improv game. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is like an improv scene. It was like unfolding in my real time. This guy comes into the branch and he was fuming mad, red face, stomping through the branch. Like it makes people uncomfortable, as you can imagine, in a bank. If someone comes in super highly emoting, like other customers were like, whoa, because he's like yelling for the manager, which I start, running up to the teller line. And he yelled for a minute about how stupid the bank is and the fees and blah, blah, blah. And my wife did this. And he was blaming everybody else about everything. Right. And so I like stood my ground and I looked at him and I was listening to him. And then I said, yes. And I paused. I hear you. Your account is overdrawn. I let it like simmer for a minute. And he was not expecting to hear the word yes, but the gift of yes is like a space holder. So he got to go, oh, I'm not suddenly being fought back at, because I think that's what people, when we're in fight mode, we're looking for a fight, whether we're conscious about it or not. And it wasn't that I agreed with him. I definitely didn't agree with the way he was behaving. And it kind of brought this space of like, yes, I'm hearing you. Oh, how frustrating. Your account is overdrawn. And I just gave him that. And then the and came a couple moments later, because sure enough, I could not even believe it. It was like, what? Because there he was standing at my teller line. He took a breath. He was still kind of fidgeting around. He was mad. He was really worked up. But he knew I was there to listen. And so I got to meet him where he was at that rage. And then a moment later, I was able to look up and I'm like, okay, well, let's see. Let's see what happened. Of course, as always, something got missed in the register and it threw things off. And there's such a fine balance here, because there's times when people also know they're kind of in the wrong, and it doesn't help to add insult to injury. So if I was using my yeah, but energy and like, I could see all the things they'd been buying in their account, I could use my judgmental mind and be like, well, maybe if you didn't buy that, that, and that, you could have paid for that, and that's yeah, buddy. Instead, it was, yes, I hear you. Gah, I met him in that yuck. And then even though I couldn't reverse all the fees, it's like we figure out where the strategy was for him to move forward. And then he got to leave feeling taken care of and heard and validated. And that is where yes and is like so freaking money, because especially when we don't agree or like it or want to do the thing, it is a very good way to neutralize challenging dynamics and to like create safe boundaries. I mean, it's all the things, but I learned in that moment that I was like, this is the game changer.
Yeah, this is an emotional intelligence skill. You were
100%.
able to read the room. You were able to create a space for meeting someone where they are, seeing empathy, staying out of judgment, and staying in curiosity, and creating that space. There is a space between stimulus and response. Many people don't know that there is a space. They just react because, we're creatures of, we're trying to stay alive, right? We're human beings that used to need to stay alive from the wildebeests, right? But now we're having the similar reaction on the freeway or the bank or an overdraft. Like, you would think life or death depended on it, because when we get hijacked emotionally like that, we don't reason. Our amygdala, it's an amygdala. Your amygdala does not work. It's there, and then your frontal cortex doesn't work. So for you to be able to read the room, meet him where he's at, create that space, this is a skill that not many people possess. And 15%, only 15% of people across all industries are actually self-aware when they've done the studies. We all think we're self-aware. We're all unicorns.
Wait, was it 15% are actually?
Self-aware if a 360-degree survey is done. So 80 to
Whoops,
95.
we got work to do.
We do. So we have to increase self-awareness, and this is one of the ways, and that's one of the components of self-awareness or of emotional intelligence. You can't even do anything until you're aware of it, right? You have evolved to that place where you have it, you're able to recognize it in others. That's the social awareness piece. So you see it in others and you're able to meet them where they are. So some people are stronger in self-awareness, some people are stronger in social awareness, some people are weak in both, some people are, and it really, intelligence has nothing to do with it. And the cool part is, these are skills that can be built, and this is why improv helps you practice the skill, because you can do a training. I could come one and done yet. Like, we could do this, we could get a training, we could do whatever, but it's not something that ends. This is something that's a lifelong practice. It's a journey that you, even though you teach it, the more you learn, don't you know how much you don't know?
Always. I'm like, all the time. And I think that's what's so cool and important. And I love, you mentioned like the collaboration space too, because a lot of times what we're teaching, there's tools and techniques of varying genres that are still meeting those same needs, or they're helping us actually activate some of these things that help us to function. And so yes and happens to be, it's easy because it's 2 little words, you can actually say it out loud, and it's very it's like an easy thing to remember. Whereas I know I've gone through, like when I was in management for years, they would send me all sorts of like leadership training things, and sometimes I was like, huh? It was like so high, like so many complex things that I was like, wait, it's which acronym goes to what? How am I supposed to remember? And some people's brains do function like that. So I think what's important is having a variety of these different things, so that, because it is this lifelong practice, it's like, how do we make sure that we are echoing those same types of energies and the dynamic of continuing to try. And like, I feel like I get challenges all the time to make sure I can keep proving that yes and works. And because that's like what I teach. I'm sure you probably find that's true in your space too, is that, oh, well, here's another lesson. Here's the 11 millionth way I can apply this exact same principle. Or when I catch myself, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I still catch myself saying or feeling, yeah, but. And then I'm aware of it though. So that what you're saying, that's horrifying to think of the low volume of true self-awareness, because it is really a powerful thing when you have a tool and you can catch yourself. Like that is truly a magnificent thing, especially in a leadership role, if people can catch themselves and do a little bit of course correction. If I say, yeah, but, and in the heat of the moment, and I'm aware, then I can fix it. It's a way that I can go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I interrupted you. Or I said, yeah, butted you. I will call it out as that, because that makes sense for me. I just totally butted on your idea. I'm so sorry. Finish that thought. That was, and then when people hear that like apology or that awareness, that just ups the trust factor too. So when people go, oh, they're realizing they're not perfect, they are genuinely trying to be better, and just so many little layers. I'm like, man, I love talking about this stuff. And also I realize I'm like, we could go 12,000 directions with this.
We just need a weekend just to do this, like
right.
girls' weekend, because, or workshop, working together to create a space where people get to practice the skills. Because it's one thing to have a training, but you have to actually role play. And this is where I feel like that, and it actually puts people outside their comfort zone, right? And their illusion of control and everything else. And so it gives them the space. Like you said, the moment came to you when you thought of how to do this. You had done it before. So then you were able to draw on those skills. And every single thing in leadership is learnable, but you have to practice them. And so this is the playground.
You want to do a practice with me right now?
Let's practice.
You want me to put you on the spot with one?
Yes,
you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to do it's a very short activity, and then listeners and viewers or wherever people are seeing this can feel it. They're going to feel it. You're going to feel it too, because you're going to be participating. And it'll demonstrate what the difference is and how people can actually implement it. Because sometimes people are like not totally sure. And obviously in a workshop, we try like 4 different ways that yes and works. But in this really quick little exercise, we're going to actually do 2 little 45-second conversations. One of them demonstrating our yeah, but energy. The other is our yes, and. So the first round, we'll do the yeah, but first.
Okay.
So I'm going to say a statement to you, and it's going to be an I love statement. So I'm going to think of something that I really love. It could be a person, a place, a thing. You're not going to know yet what's coming at you. It's just something that if I'm like, oh my gosh, when I think about that, I'm like, yes, I can't get enough of it. I love it that much. Okay. You're going to respond to my I love statement with yeah, but, and then respond to whatever I just said. Tell me something about that. And then I will respond to whatever you said with yeah, but. And we're only going to go for about 45 seconds. So I'm going to start my timer and then we'll unpack it a little bit. So just make sure that each of our responses for this round is yeah, but, and then respond to whatever the last thing was said.
Okay.
Got it? All right. Here we go. I love my kids.
Yeah, but aren't they annoying?
Yeah, but I mean, they're little humans that are just trying to figure out how to function in their bodies.
Yeah, but doesn't it just get exhausting?
Yeah, but it's not really any choice once they're born. They're here.
Yeah, but you could pawn them off on someone else.
Yeah, but is that going to make them resent me when they're older?
Yeah, but they're going to anyways.
Yeah, but maybe if I just was a better mom.
Yeah, but don't we all wish we were?
Okay, time. All right.
God, that was gross. That was a gross.
That's really yucky, right? So I want people to
I feel
think like,
gross.
what words are they used to describe that? Like in workshops and stuff with teams and stuff, commonly people are like yucky, negative, like nobody, the people don't want to continue having conversation, defensive, like our feelings, like, excuse me, my kids. And it could be anything. Someone could say, I love pepperoni pizza. And if you immediately meet it with yeah, but it's like rude, like what the heck? Okay, so now we're going to flip the script. And this time you're going to say something that you love. And then each of our responses is yes, and then we add something to it. Okay?
I love it.
Whenever you're ready.
Bring it.
All right. Go ahead. Tell me, you get to tell me something you love.
That I love. I love creating a workspace where humans flourish.
Yes. And it's so cool to see someone carry themselves with a higher posture once they feel empowered with a new tool.
Yes, and it actually, you learn as much from them as they learn from you when you're going through this process.
Yes. And what really excites me is when people are in that space and feel comfortable, they share more unexpected things than you might have expected.
Yes, and that sharing leads to higher trust, increased vulnerability, and care for one another as human beings.
Yes. And that is exactly what I was feeling, is like the empathy capacity grows, and I feel like we can appreciate each other more for our different experiences.
Yes, and I also think that the more that we practice this, the more our skills go up because we're working together as a team. It's a team approach versus me as a rugged individualist relying on myself.
It's great time. We actually went a little over because I was like, this is flowing. And I'm
And
like,
it's
we can
fun.
lose track of time.
I want to stay in that
so
conversation.
did that feel different to
Yeah.
you as a participant? Could you feel the difference?
Yeah, I absolutely can feel the negative vampire energy versus the I want to keep having this conversation and this is a person I want to spend time with. So I know, even working in business, I know who I want to work with, and I can get the vibe right away. Like, this is not, I'm not your person.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I know. And it's crazy. It is crazy because it's so simple. Like sometimes, of course, it's easy for us to also yes and if it's a topic that we're like, yeah,
Yes,
this
and.
is something we could totally jam on. And it can be just as rewarding if like someone says, like I remember doing a group once where someone said, I love mountain biking. And the other person is not into biking at all. but they could still take that opportunity to go, yes. And a great time of the year to be on a mountain bike is the spring. So now we're talking about spring, and it's not just about the bike. It's about what else. If this is true, then what else is true? That's a huge thing in improv, is like, let's keep unpacking and expanding our curiosity around what else is possible. And then, as you're saying, it can also be this really great boundary setter. Like after these workshops or during, right during it, when people realize it, people will either self-identify that they're like, oh my gosh, I yeah, but on my spouse, or I yeah, but on myself, whatever their awareness is coming. Or we're also thinking of who are the yeah butters in our lives, who are the people that we don't share our big ideas with, who are the people that we are really guarded with our energy, and how can we really be empowered to use that as a boundary setting space while being the good, yummy yes and energy, whenever possible. Because I always have this hope that people who are stuck in yeah but land and they just don't know yet, that they could be inspired by seeing better patterns demonstrated for them while still guarding my energy and
And
all the things.
I love the thing that you brought up, that it is easy when it's something you're passionate about. But let's just say politics. And my next guest today is a politician, and I think this is a skill we can use in politics. So as I think about agreeing and going to the next topic, like you said, like you gave the example of going to spring versus on the mountain biking thing. Let's just practice it from a political perspective. I'm not a highly political person, but the thing I definitely see is that we're so polarized, and we like to, judgmentalism is a disease of the mind, right? And it's making an us against them, and there's nowhere to meet in the middle. There's no space of seeing them and coming to an agreement. So in a political space, or let's just say your Thanksgiving dinner topic, right, during COVID, and most people didn't even hang out with their family that that they disagreed with, and lots of relationships have been ended. But how could we use this in a space for political places where we are? Can you think of an example where you've done this, where there was something that you fundamentally disagreed with, and how you yes-and it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You ready for this?
Yes.
Yeah, because this is exactly where it matters the most. Right. So, and it's hard because we're using that word, like, how do we come to an agreement? And I don't know that we ever fully will come to an agreement, because what's shocking is there's so many people who are saying one thing and doing another thing. And my view, so I'll give you a specific example, but my general view over this is, when there's misunderstandings or our guard is up around something, it's because we're usually lacking information or stories or experiences that can help us to understand that there are other factors at play. For example, one polarizing topic in our nation is what happens if there's an unplanned pregnancy. This happens to be a subject matter that I'm experienced in because I experienced an unplanned pregnancy when I was in high school. I've since written an award-winning book about it, and it's part of my main signature message, coupled with yes and, because my journey ended with me choosing to go through with the pregnancy, and I chose to place that child for adoption because I did not feel like I was in a position to raise the child myself. And that was a decision I made with my own brain and followed my own heart, which really felt like intuitively guided. And I was very much in that space of like, this was the decision that felt right for me. Now, I grew up in a dynamic of, and not just in my own household, but just like the community that I grew up in is very, very heavily pro-life. And I remember learning at a young age that pro-choice meant only abortion, right? So we're hearing all these different messages, and not to have this be like a massively long thing, because I, of course, could talk for hours on this subject matter. But as I grew up and I had my true one experience that I actually kept guarded for a long time for fear of judgment and shame. And I was kind of encouraged to not talk about it anymore because I'd repented of it and whatever. And yet it was this really profound part of my life. And to me, it was this gift of like, I was able to be a vessel for a human baby for a woman who could not have her own children. And so I was seeing this amazing blessing while also having a lot of shame and negative things put on it. And years later, 15 plus years later, I wrote a book about it because I felt very compelled to just include that dialogue of adoption as an option. Because whether we like it or agree with it, there are three options if there's an unplanned pregnancy. There is an adoption, there is keeping the child and raising that child yourself, or there is a termination of the pregnancy. All three of those options exist whether or not we like or agree with them.
Period.
And I have, period. And when I first got into the adoption space, I was still very, very much in this pro-life. Like I thought there was this one track. And when I shared my adoption story, the floodgates opened. And I have heard, I don't even know how many stories over the years now from men and women, all sorts of people who have been affected by an unplanned pregnancy, of people who have been placed for adoption, people who were forced to place for adoption, people who were forced to keep their baby, people who were forced to terminate their baby. There is every which way you can possibly dice it. I have heard a story and I have seen the human emotion come from that person who is sharing a story with me, which I don't take lightly. What I saw from that, though, is it expanded my understanding around that topic. What my viewpoint was this very tiny little window of what I personally knew. And when I heard all these other stories and a variety of circumstances and how certain things like miscarriages are technically categorized under abortion, called a spontaneous abortion. Those are in some of the statistics. So as I started looking into the numbers, as you said at the very beginning, we're looking for things like, where is the information? Where are the reports? There are billions of us on this planet. There's no one cut and dry way. So when it comes to politics, when it comes to those ultra sensitive topics, if we are not willing to yes and look for the way, I feel like, how can we be making choices and creating spaces that allow us to be agents for ourselves as much as possible, which is a very difficult thing when we're talking about politics, we're talking about law. I work with a lot of lawyers, which doesn't surprise me now when I realize how much we're trying to argue these different cases and what's right and wrong, because yes and is not always what's right and wrong. It's that these things happened and how do we move through them and past them, and how do we avoid hurting people as much as possible? How do we heal things when something has gone wrong? And why do we call everything a mistake when maybe it wasn't a mistake? It was just a certain choice that was made, and people don't have to be condemned their entire life because of a choice. And whatever God, I get so passionate about this because I'm like, whatever God or universe or whatever judgment figure people think of in whatever religion, XYZ religion, I think most people know that the judgment is coming from a higher power. And yet we try to wield that power on each other. And it is so exhausting. So there's not an easy answer, unfortunately. What I love to invite people to do is, if you think you know this one true way, this one certain thing, and this is the only right way possible, challenge it. Look for things that report the opposing view so you can understand where they might be coming from. Not that you necessarily have to change your mind immediately, but rather allow that there are other things involved, and we might not know what other details or circumstances or very challenging things. And I don't want to take that ownership over someone else. I don't want to have really any, unless I'm helping someone be more creative in their curiosity and how they think, not what they think. Did I say that right? Yeah. I want people to know how to think for themselves, not what to think. I'm not telling them they have to think this thing. And I think that's where, like, how do I bring this thought to a close? It's like, it's allowing us to go, okay, I don't have to sacrifice my beliefs in order to listen to other people, to understand them, so that we might be able to find a closer resolve that serves more people in the best way possible.
Oh, man. Yeah, I definitely want to have more of those conversations, and I want to dive deeper into this so much. But I think you've given really good examples of how powerful this tool is, of how how it's needed. There was even more research that I saw that it was actually helping kids with social anxiety. This yes and it's building trust and so what are some websites, some tools, like if just for the average person, what do we do?
Oh my gosh, there's so many
Start.
resources. There's a lot of really fun books out there, including, I'm like, which ones do I have on here? There's a book actually called Yes and. Tina Fey, who is a legend in Saturday Night Live land, she wrote a book called Bossy Pants that's really great, and it's all about how you use these tools in life. There's a really simple website called Improv Encyclopedia where you can just pull up games according to like icebreakers or staff meeting or whatever. And they're categorized. You can find things that are like nonverbal, like which ones are emotional based or body language or pantomiming, or which ones are wordplay. So there's all sorts of different things. There's probably an improv community that you don't even know about right in your town. Like just Google it up, go to a workshop, have fun with it. But there's tons and tons of free resources. And of course you can follow me. I'm usually dropping nuggets on my social media accounts too.
Yes. Follow Megan. And how do they find you? How does somebody go about booking a workshop? How do we work together? What do we do? Give us the pathway.
I know. Yeah. Most of my stuff is through my website is Improv Team Culture. And then that's my Instagram handle as well. I'm Kooky Megan, not Cookie. Kooky. Kooky Megan is where you can find me on most socials. And I'm really starting to dive into that space again, kind of deciding what I wanted to do again after the season of darkness.
Yeah.
And starting to have some live events and some different things. Sometimes there's opportunities in like the virtual space. Some people they're really not comfortable stepping into like a theater even to play. Although there is a lot of power in like going and connecting with a group of strangers where you suddenly feel safe in like 12 minutes. It's completely profoundly magical. But yeah, I mean, there's for sure lots of overlap of things. I know we talked about it before, but having something that is like some sort of interactive dynamic that we just create and people show up. But
absolutely, I'm down for it. So I want to play, and I want to collaborate on how. And this is going to be helpful for our listeners. It's content now that I have, just little tools and simple ones. And whether that means they bring it into their organization, whether that means they just start doing it as individuals and as families, get your kids in improv. Start practicing some games. We did some just camping, and after I listened, there was a podcast that I listened to, and it might be helpful for you and for our listeners too. It is Dacher Keltner is from the Science of Happiness. He does a lot of research on emotions and awe. So he has a podcast called The Science of Happiness, and the podcast that I got some research on was how improv makes you more confident and less anxious. And then there's some research by a professor out of Northern Michigan University that did it with his social work students, and he actually compared improv with mindfulness to see what the actual overlap was. And so I really want to see if I can get him on the podcast as well. But I think this is all intermingled. It's all intertwined. It's skill building, and it's fun. And people need to know how to have fun at work.
Totally. That's absolutely. I mean, because even people don't have to be funny.
Yeah.
This creates a space where there's always giggling because people are saying things they may not have thought to say that day because of the different types of prompts. And I will say, as a parent, me demonstrating it, me living it is such a powerful gift to my kids, I think, and they have also at some point been to different things too, of course, like workshop wise. But as parents, like a lot of times people will be like, oh, you should have your kid do this. And I 100% want kids and teens to do it. Mm-hmm. They love it. I will say that it breaks my heart when I go and I do youth workshops and they look at me with just this hopelessness and they say, I sure wish my parents knew this. I wish my parents would listen to this. So we're a lot of times as parents trying to do all these things for our kids. And the gift for them is showing our own growth and our willingness to try new things and expand our comfort zone. And we need to start now breaking down some of the bad patterns so that maybe our kids and the next generation of kids aren't having to untangle so much anxiousness. Maybe we can expand things now as adults and rekindle some of the childhoods that a lot of us, there's a lot of adults because of certain circumstances that we've grown up in that we maybe missed out on. And to revive that child within us is such a yummy gift to yourself that will ripple effect to our children. But it is probably one of the most heartbreaking things for me when my youth group people that I talk to, and I've taught thousands over the years of kids, and they just look at me and they're just like, I wish you could talk to my mom or my aunt or my grandma or whoever they're living with, because the parents need to do it too. Like, we need to play together. And we need to just combine those forces, because we do so much magic as adults when we get to be playful and creative and laugh and feel that freedom of being who we are.
I love that. And it reminds me of how my kids bring out my joy. I think I have theater kids, right? So my son, he now works at Boise State, but he's a musical theater major, and so is his wife. And she actually works for Treasure Valley Children's Theater doing a lot of this.
Awesome.
So whenever I'm around them, it's the yes and crowd. And I mean, whenever I'm with them, I my soul is fueled. Because and my daughter too. She's not a theater person, but we live in that space. So it's one of those things where I think that even if you didn't think that you've got this fixed mindset about you can't do improv, you're not good at this, you're not a public speaker, all the stories that you've told yourself that aren't truths, but they're beliefs that you have, just step outside of your comfort zone and just start with this yes and game. We did it around the fire pit, with the nieces and nephews, and they said that was, at the end of the weekend, what was some of the most fun that you had? What did you enjoy the most? And they said, my nieces and nephews, I really enjoyed our stories, and even my brother, who can be real crunchy, he was like, I really loved what we did at the fire, because we all connected. It's the story where it just keeps going. The person adds a word around the circle. So, and it was so fun, and everybody just felt so connected. And you really do have to be present, because you're hearing it come around and you're thinking about what you're going to say, but you can't say what you're thinking, because by the time it gets to you, it's going to be completely different. So you have to really listen and stay present. And I think that's a skill you could do around the table, around a fire pit, and it doesn't require any money. It is just simple.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you're on the podcast. I want to talk more. I want to see how we can work together, and maybe have you even do a little bit of work with some of my emotional intelligence people in some of my courses, because it's a skill builder is really what it is.
Totally.
And a fun haver and an energy booster. And who couldn't use more of that?
For sure. Agreed. Well, thank you for having me. I love any chance I get to share my joy of improv.
Yeah.
Did you know that Black River offers a learning management system with over 10,000 development topics? The Leader U Learning Management System is an affordable option that empowers organizations to manage and curate in-house learning development opportunities. The built-in calendar and scheduling system can be used to coordinate compliance courses such as HR Respectful Workplace and IT Cybersecurity, or lunch and learns on topics such as motivation, self-leadership, and leading more effective meetings. At Black River, we are dedicated to providing a learning solution that focuses on engaging employees in their own self and team development. Our clients use the Leader U Learning Management System to remove barriers through accessible and self-paced micro-learning content, save time with the centralized and automated training assignments, promote more meaningful team discussions, issue certificates of completion and track development efforts, and enhance and simplify onboarding efforts. Contact us for more information on our learning management system at info@blackriverpm.com.